Senator Inhofe.
Well, Ms. Hicks, I just really appreciate that last statement that you made, that this is something that isn't here now. It isn't available at this time. And can we look into the future and say, yes, this would be nice when we get to the point that we have all these things. To me, I agree with the chairman. That's the crux of the problem. When we have just this week, well, first of all, let me just stipulate to what the EPA director said when I asked the question. You know, in the event we pass legislation like this that is for the United States, is this going to have a reduction in overall emissions? And the answer is no. I think logically we all know that, so let's keep that in mind. But when we have a report that just came out by CRS that says America's combined recoverable natural gas, oil, and coal reserves is the largest on Earth, but the problem is that 83% of it we can't get to. So let me just ask you a question, Admiral McGinn. Wouldn't you agree that don't look way down in the future. Let's look at tomorrow. Let's look at today. We need to have the availability of fossil fuels. Now, don't you agree, stipulate to that?
Senator, I agree, and I would say that the age of fossil fuel has been very, very good to the United States of America, starting back with Colonel Drake in 1854 in Pennsylvania discovering this oil. It has been very good, and we're not going to transition off it overnight.
Okay.
It's just that we need to start, and we need to start in significant ways, not small incremental steps.
Well, let me, real quick, these have to be short answers because I'm operating in this short time frame. When the statement that you made, General Scales, that there's no scientific evidence that suggests that wars will be propelled and sustained by any power other than fossil fuels. I know you're talking about now in the near future. Colonel Carafano, do you agree with that statement?
I look to Bob because he's a historian, but my point would be in the short term is what you have to look at, what is the competitiveness structure of the United States? And so my concern is when you start to take away jobs and economic growth, that is the single most important fuel to the defense industrial base. And that limits your ability more than anything else to respond. Well, and that steps down. As the United States is a lesser and less capable power, that increases instability. So it's the overall decline in the economy in the short term, which I think creates the kind of world that we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, you wanted to say something, General Scales?
Yes, sir. Two quick points. If Dennis and I were to have a conversation 100 years ago over cavalry versus coal-powered ships, we would at least have been able to discuss the looming probability that oil-fired burners were just around the corner, that by 1918, 1919, the great navies of the world had already started to convert from coal. Well, okay. But my point is this, Senator, is I don't see any evidence right now over the next 20 to 30 years that some other form of fuel will propel our war-making machinery. And my concern is that if we reduce our availability of refined petroleum products over the next 20 or 30 years, that might reduce our ability to go to war. It's just that simple.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that, and I won't ask for a response, Mr. Admiral, again, because my time is expiring pretty fast here. The only thing I want to get to, and I think it's very important for every member of the panel to recognize, at least publicly recognize the fact that we have to have fossil fuels today to fight wars. This is a national security issue. And when we're the largest, have the largest reserves in the world, and yet we can't, politically, we can't develop 83% of it, wouldn't you agree that we need to, if you really feel sincere about not depending upon foreign countries, our enemies perhaps, depending on them for our ability to fight a war, shouldn't we develop our own resources? What do you think, Colonel?
Yes, sir.
I mean, is there anyone who would disagree that we need to develop our own resources? Yes.
We do need to develop our own resources, but we need to recognize that there's an opportunity cost. If we place too much of our time and effort and resources into the continuation of our track record of fossil fuel, there's a tremendous opportunity cost for not doing other things that are going to have much, much better returns in jobs in the near term and in national security and prosperity in the long term.
We're talking about fighting a war today, General Scales. You got to have fossil fuels to do it. Right now, we have fossil fuels, but we're importing fossil fuels from countries that could cut us off. There is a risk there. And when we're looking at our opportunity to develop fossil fuels without, not at the expense of anything else, wind or anything else, but to develop them because we have these reserves, can you think of any reason not to do it?
I can't, Senator, and I'd also agree with Dennis that we need to push the limits of science. We need to find different fuels. We need to find alternative sources. We need to conserve. All of that is absolutely essential for national security. I'm worried about the next 20 years when, whether we're fighting a war against a major power or a failed state is attempting to attack us, at the end of the day, we still have to fuel the machine, so to speak, and right now the only alternative is fossil fuels.
And Senator Warner, don't you think we ought to develop our own resources?
Absolutely. And if I might inject, there's been a lot of discussion here this morning about nuclear power. I was privileged to be a part of a Navy where we had over 100 platforms operating safely, as there have been throughout almost the entire history of the naval reactor program. We ought to draw on that technology, as the Senator Tennessee said, and put together a strong package as a part of any legislation to help the nuclear industry come back again to the strength it once was in this country. And it seems to me you have to package that with also greater access to this 80%. And when you get down to legislation, colleagues, you know it's those types of packages that'll balance off the cap and trade, which is so intensely felt on part of this hearing room, as well as the energy sources of nuclear and drilling on the other side. And it's that type of package you've got to put together, Madam Chairman, to get this bill through. You're at a fork in the road right now as to whether or not Congress is going to lay down the roadmap for this country, or we're going to just rely on the executive branch and the inherent power of the agencies and departments.
I'm going to put in the record, without objection, the study that was just done by UC Berkeley,